At 6:47 in the morning, I was standing barefoot on my own gravel driveway, holding a chipped coffee mug, watching red and blue lights flash through the fog like something out of a crime show. Two police cruisers idled at the edge of my property, engines humming low, and across the street stood the president of the Briar Ridge HOA with a clipboard tucked against her chest like she'd just won a trophy. And the wildest part wasn't the cops showing up. It was the way she was smiling, like this was the moment she'd been waiting for. The younger officer stepped toward me, first, polite but cautious. "Sir, we got a call about a trespasser refusing to leave this property." I actually laughed just once because sometimes your brain doesn't know what else to do. "If I'm trespassing," I said, lifting my mug, "I've been breaking the law every morning for the last 6 months." She pointed at me without even looking embarrassed. "He's not a member of the association," she said sharply. "He's occupying community land. Occupying. Like I'd set up a tent and started a revolution." I walked to the porch, grabbed the folder I'd started keeping by the door, and handed the officer my deed. He read it, checked the parcel number, then looked at me with that tired expression cops get when they realize they've been dragged into a neighbor dispute. "This shows you own it," he said. "Yes, sir," I replied, calm as I could be. The HOA president, her name's Paige Langford, shifted her weight in those expensive heels like the ground just tilted under her. That was the first time she called the cops on me for living on my own land. But it wasn't the last. I'm 51, retired from 20 years in county fire rescue. I've run into burning buildings without thinking twice. I've carried strangers out through smoke so thick you can't see your own hands, and I've stood in driveways at 3 in the morning telling families their house is gone. After my wife passed 5 years ago, I didn't want chaos anymore. I didn't want sirens or city lights or the noise that follows you home. I wanted quiet. So I bought 4 acres just outside Briar Ridge Estates, technically outside according to the county plat map, with an old barn, a leaning oak tree, and a creek that sounds like someone breathing when the wind hits it right. It felt like oxygen after years of smoke. 3 weeks after closing, I got a glossy welcome packet in my mailbox from the Briar Ridge Community Association. Gold lettering, strict guidelines approved, paint colors, fence materials, mailbox heights, the works. I remember sitting at my kitchen table sipping coffee thinking this had to be a mistake. I emailed the address on the brochure and said, "Appreciate the welcome, but I'm not in your HOA." No reply. A few days later, a white SUV started creeping past my gate twice a day, slow enough to count the dents in my truck. Paige Langford, behind the wheel, sunglasses on, phone raised like she was filming wildlife. That's when the letters started. Friendly reminder, she called them. My gravel driveway wasn't approved. My barn didn't meet community aesthetic standards. My fence was non-compliant. I ignored the first few because I figured someone would look at a map, feel embarrassed, and move on. But people who crave control don't move on. They escalate. The first time she came onto my land in person, she didn't introduce herself. She just pointed at my barn and said, "That structure is not approved." I wiped my hands on a rag and told her, "It's a barn. It's older than this entire subdivision." She smiled like I'd just told a joke she didn't get. "You're within Briar Ridge jurisdiction." "No, ma'am," I said evenly, "I'm not." She snapped a picture anyway. You know what I mean, the kind of person who needs to document something just to feel powerful. That's when I spread 2 maps across my kitchen table, the official county plat and the version on the HOA's website. My land stops about 200 feet outside their boundary. Their map, though, had my entire parcel shaded light blue and labeled community buffer. It wasn't a clerical error, it was a redraw. And that's when I started a binder. Evidence day 1. She escalated from letters to threats, from threats to inspections. One morning, a county zoning inspector knocked on my door because someone had anonymously reported an unpermitted structure. Behind him, 3 houses down, sat Paige's white SUV angled perfectly toward my barn. The inspector looked around, scribbled notes, then shook his head. "Nothing wrong here," he muttered. Off the record, he told me some HOA boards get a little overzealous. I smiled and said, "Some people need hobbies that don't involve other people's property." That should have ended it, but it didn't. 3 nights later, headlights rolled across my yard around midnight, then disappeared. The next morning, a certified letter taped to my mailbox claimed I was trespassing on common property. Trespassing. That word hit different. A fine is petty. Trespassing is a weapon. And sure enough, 2 nights later, the cops came back, same accusation, same flashing lights. The sergeant recognized me by then. "We've been here before," he said quietly after reviewing my deed again. "This is unfounded." He handed my paperwork back and added almost under his breath, "Keep records. This is crossing a line." That's when I called Rachel Moore, a property lawyer I'd met years ago when I pulled her father out of a house fire. She came over navy suit at my kitchen table, flipping through my binder like she was reading a novel she didn't like. "This boundary amendment," she said, tapping the HOA map, "was never properly recorded. No certified notice, no county stamp. That makes it unenforceable." Then she looked at me and said something that shifted everything. "You're not the only one." Within a week, neighbors started showing up at my porch after dark like it was a secret meeting. Luis and Jenna brought a fine letter for $7,000 because their kid built a backyard playhouse. Mrs. Harlan, a widow in her 70s, showed up shaking because she'd been threatened with a lien over her rose bushes. A teacher got cited for a carpool sign. A veteran got fined over the angle of his flag. Same pattern every time. Intimidation, silence payment. Paige wasn't just nitpicking, she was ruling by fear. We built a digital folder, installed cameras, logged every drive-by, every letter, every interaction. And that's when she went public. Flyers appeared around the neighborhood with my photo on them, grainy cropped, accusing me of being a disruptive non-member. Someone splashed white paint across the hood of my truck one night, thick drips running down the windshield like candle wax. I stood there in the driveway staring at it, not angry, yet just tired. Rachel told me, "She wants you to react. If you lose your temper, she wins." So I didn't. We kept documenting. Then discovery happened. Bank records, statements, consulting fees paid to a company owned by Paige. Community relations expenses routed straight into her personal account. We ran the numbers twice, roughly $150,000 missing over 18 months. Then we found the loan, a balloon loan taken out for the clubhouse years ago, final payment looming, no reserves set aside. And buried in the fine print was the twist. If the association defaulted, the lender could foreclose on the common property, and governance rights attached to it. Rachel looked at me slowly. "Whoever buys it," she said, "owns the HOA." A week later, I saw the foreclosure notice taped to a courthouse bulletin board. Auction in 21 days. Starting bid, $650,000. My coffee went cold in my hand. Paige had built her power on land she didn't even own outright, and the bank was about to take it back. I called my brother Clay, told him I wanted to buy an HOA. Long pause. Then he said, "You've lost it." I said, "Maybe. But if I win, she loses everything she used to control people." We scraped together what we could. Bridge financing savings favors. Auction day came with gray skies and a small crowd of investors who smelled opportunity. Bidding crawled from $650 to $690. Silence hung heavy. I raised my hand. $691. No one countered. Gavel hit. Sold. Just like that, I owned the common land, the clubhouse, the signage, and the governance privileges. The next morning, Paige drove up in that white SUV looking like she hadn't slept in days. "You can't buy a neighborhood," she snapped. I wiped my hands on a rag and met her stare. Apparently, I just did. Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for a clause that didn't exist. "This isn't over," she said. "It is," I replied calmly. "You're just late to the ending." The courtroom hearing came fast. Rachel presented the evidence. Altered boundaries, selective enforcement, embezzled funds, defaulted loan. Paige's attorney called them accounting errors. Rachel answered errors that landed in her account. And then the doors opened. Financial crimes detective stepped in with a warrant. Paige was arrested for felony embezzlement, forgery, fraud. The sound of the handcuffs clicking echoed through that courtroom like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. The judge dissolved the association and approved transfer of the assets into a community trust. Outside reporters asked how it felt to own the neighborhood. I said, "Feels like peace finally got its permit." 3 months later, Briar Ridge isn't a battleground anymore. We formed a nonprofit trust with elected volunteers. Dues dropped to something reasonable. Budgets are transparent. No fines over mailbox colors. Kids repainted the clubhouse walls sky blue. Mrs. Harlan's roses sit proudly near the walkway. And Paige. She pleaded guilty, paid restitution, and got barred from holding any fiduciary position again. But here's the part people still argue about. Some neighbors say she meant well. that she kept standards high, that someone has to enforce rules. And every time I hear that, I think about those flashing lights at 6:47 a.m., about standing barefoot on my own driveway being called a trespasser. I think about how easy it is for control to disguise itself as order. So I want to ask you something. When rules are used to intimidate, when paperwork becomes a weapon, when authority is fueled by fear instead of fairness, is that really community? Or is it just control in a clean blazer? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think buying the HOA was justice or revenge. And if you've ever dealt with a board boss or anyone who thought a title gave them the right to bully you, I want to hear your story too. Because sometimes the only way to stop a paper fire is to read the fine print and then light your own match.